Welcome to Georgia Gang on this Sunday, July 26th. President Trump rallies the GOP base in Cobb County. The president pitched his new Trump accounts at a Cobb County school, drawing backlash from critics who called the event a glorified campaign rally. Meanwhile, Senator Jon Ossoff is calling out Republican challenger Mike Collins over reports linking his campaign to white nationalism. And new poll numbers are out in Georgia's key races for U.S. Senate and governor. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Brian are all here. I'm Deidre Dukes and for Lori Geary. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
An enthusiastic crowd packed the gymnasium at Wheeler High School in Cobb County Wednesday as President Donald Trump made an appearance to promote his administration's new Trump Accounts initiative. The federal program aims to help families build wealth for their children by providing a $1,000 contribution from the government as seed money. But with Georgia's high-profile races taking center stage, the event quickly took on the energy of a campaign rally. The president threw his full support behind the state's Republican ticket, offering endorsements for U.S. Senate candidate Mike Collins, Lieutenant Governor candidate Greg Dolezal, Attorney General candidate Brian Strickland, and gubernatorial candidate Rick Jackson. Now, Phil, we also heard directly from most of the candidates during the event as state Republicans work to energize their base ahead of the midterms.
Well, I think it was a great event at Wheeler High School. It's one of the top high schools. I want to give a shout out in Georgia. They do great on the student achievement tests. And Superintendent Chris Ragsdale and the school board, both Democrats and Republicans on the school board attended. And what this was yes, it was to tout the Trump accounts. And it was also, I've been to these things since Bill Clinton was president. Bill Clinton had these type of rallies. Democrats would come. Nothing wrong with that. You would have prominent officials of your president's party there. And yeah, they gave some policy speeches and it was a rah-rah thing. Obama has been in Cobb County and in Georgia and had a similar thing. This is not unusual. You had 3 cabinet members there, which is a little different from your usual rally, but the point is it was a report, and you had families, and the liberal media, the AJC was so bad with their bias, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, you wouldn't know that there was a tribute to the family that was killed right there. The son was killed of a family right there in Cobb County, and you had 2 families, one black and one white, that gave tribute to how this was going to help their little kids up there, and the media just glossed over that for the most part. Actually, the TV news was far better than the print news in the metro Atlanta area. But I think it was a great showcase of what was going on with regard to this great thing. And of course, the big news, gubernatorial candidate Rick Jackson made the big announcement that he was going to match the 1,000 seed money of the Trump money for the children. And to me, that is really going to boost him in the polls.
Yeah, and we'll delve more into that in a moment. Theron, the resounding message from this campaign rally from Republicans is that Georgia is still very much a red state, even though Democrats are saying it's trending purple.
Well, it is a purple state, and the polling shows that it's purple. Right now, you've had 3 consistent polls, Deidre, that shows that Jon Ossoff and Keisha Lance Bottoms are leading. Now, that race will tighten because a lot of money have not been spent yet. But I want to go back to sort of the tone and tenor of this rally. Yes, it was about roughly, say, 5 to 7 minutes talking about the Trump accounts. And then from the remaining time of the duration of the rally, it did actually have a very stark political tone about promoting the Republican agenda here. 3 things that I take away from. Number one, Deidre, you talked about this in your package. A lot of Cobb County parents were outraged that this went to Wheeler High School, so much so that they showed up at the school board meeting, and a lot of them left when the video was played. They felt like the Wheeler High School, yeah, if you're going to talk about Trump accounts and talk about education, was great, but it did turn into the rally. The second thing that came out that media reports need to talk more about is that Donald Trump said that he has never heard of this word before called affordability. He said, this is the first time I've actually heard this word. And then Rick Jackson gets up there and says that affordability is not a political problem. Now, I agree with Rick Jackson a little bit. They're saying that, yeah, it's not just a political problem, but it's a problem that corporate businesses, small businesses, but more importantly, prioritization of someone who's running for governor. So you have a president who doesn't know the word affordability, doesn't know what it means. You have a gubernatorial candidate saying that it's not a political problem. That was a big takeaway there. And then the last thing is that for him to do it in Cobb County, Deidre, to your point, a county where Democrats have have won not only in 2020 and 2024, where Vice President Harris beat him there, Joe Biden beat him there as well previously. For him to do it there in that county shows that the voters in Cobb County don't want Donald Trump, and now Rick Jackson and every other candidate who received his endorsement have to defend this failed agenda for Donald Trump right now that's not working for hardworking Georgians.
Yeah, and there was a huge turnout for President Trump, but protesters did gather outside the school. There were critics who attended the Cobb County School Board meeting. Also on Thursday, very upset that President Trump was allowed to address supporters to hold the Trump account program there at the school. And Melita, community leaders, local parents are very concerned about this, saying that it was way out of line.
Well, they are, and I think you'll see repercussions of this for holding the school superintendent accountable, because what kind of judgment does it show on his part to allow what is essentially a campaign rally in a public school rather than a policy discussion? And you had the president himself exhibiting behavior that if it had been by students wouldn't have been allowed. He used cuss words. He made up facts, he exhibited bullying behavior, and he was late for his own rally. So students would be punished for those sorts of things. And teachers are not allowed to be partisan and encourage one partisan view, but you had a whole political rally proposing Republican policies. So there will be long-lasting repercussions from those parents who protested on Thursday evening when it comes time for the school board elections coming up.
Yeah, and Brian, you do represent Rick Jackson. We want to note that. That was perhaps one of the biggest pieces of news to come out of that rally on Wednesday.
You know, Democrats want to make this rally or this event, this official event, about Donald Trump and about the stuff that Melita just mentioned. But the fact is, Rick Jackson really stole the air out of their balloon by making the news about his pledge to put state-level dollars into the Trump accounts to help kids in need and to make sure that we can help them have a better and brighter future. Maybe buy their first home when they're in their 20s because they got this little nest egg there. So this was the news of the day, not all the side stuff that the Democrats want to make it about. You know, Rick Jackson has long cared about this issue because of his emphasis on foster care. And of course, one of his major things is they hit 18 and they're cut off. Like they have no foster home, they have no money from the state, they don't have a job, and the statistics of what happens to them are disastrous and a stain on the reputation of the state. So that's where the origins of Rick Jackson's heart is on this, is making sure that kids have opportunity. And this is a chance to expand that beyond foster kids to all the kids in Georgia so they have a bright future. One thing I want to tell you about the interest that Georgians have, and Democrats are going to hate this too, the clip that Rick Jackson posted on Facebook got 360,000 plus views organically, no money put behind it. The clip on Instagram got more than 450,000 organic views. So Georgians were eating this up. They're highly interested. And look, this is the sort of forward-looking big picture ideas that you're going to get from a businessman as governor. Barron talked about what Rick said about this isn't a political problem. Here's the full quote of what Rick says. These problems aren't political problems, they're business problems. I'm a businessman. I will bring business solutions. And that's what you saw here.
And Theron, I'll let you have the last word since your name was mentioned.
And I'll save a little time for Melita, too. Thank you, Deidre. Okay, it's good that you actually said the full clip, but you're running for governor. You can't say that affordability is not a political problem when you're actually trying to be the leader of this state. And what you did there very successfully is that you pivoted away from the fact that Donald Trump's, and Melita talked about some of his conduct and things. I got to think that the Rick Jackson campaign did not want to be a part of all of that circus that was going on, because he is trying to distance himself a little bit from Trump, but then to go up there and stand with him, wear the same red tie, sound much like him in what he's proposing, I don't think that that's going to help expand the coalition, which I know you guys have been working very hard on.
Melita?
Well, there was a separate story this week. It takes 5 people earning a minimum wage salary to afford a single one-bedroom apartment in Atlanta. So you've got the contrast of the gubernatorial candidate with his 47,000 square foot mansion, and you've got 5 minimum wage workers needing to band together to afford a single one-bedroom apartment in the metro area. So affordability is a big deal.
Well, I will say one thing. It was actually, he was mocking the way the Democrats all of a sudden rolled out the quote-unquote affordability. Obviously, and he said this in his remarks, we want to get the interest rate down. We're now energy independent. He gave a little report card there along with the Trump accounts. What's wrong with the president doing that? Other presidents have done that.
And I'll say Rick Jackson has spoken extensively in this general election period, which is pretty short so far, on affordability. His first campaign event in Cleveland, Georgia, which we discussed here, was all about the affordability crisis. And again, he said, I can bring business solutions to these business problems. So it is front of mind for Rick Jackson.
What do you think Rick Jackson's response was when he stood there next to the president, or stood down on the stage and the president said he's never heard of the word affordability before? It's the first time hearing it.
What I know,
Totally out of context.
That's what he said.
But what I know is that Rick Jackson is focused on affordability, on health care, on child care, on education, on taxes.
We'll leave it there. We could spend the whole half hour debating this topic, but we have several more topics to come. And coming up, demanding answers on the campaign trail. Senator Jon Ossoff calls out his opponent Mike Collins over reported links to a white nationalist influencer. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
In Georgia's U.S. Senate race, Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff is demanding answers from his Republican challenger, Representative Mike Collins. Ossoff is calling on Collins to clarify ties between his campaign and family business and a white nationalist influencer, following recent investigative reports. Now, the senator is pressing Collins to account for the extremist rhetoric and publicly address whether any campaign funds were involved. Now, we reached out to Congressman Collins for comment when we first reported the story, and a campaign rep responded in a written statement saying, quote, Representative Collins has always condemned all forms of anti-Semitism, including this, and always will, regardless of source. Collins' lifelong support for Israel and the Jewish people is guided by his personal beliefs and backed by his consistent voting record. Now, Brian, do these reports actually hurt the Collins campaign, or are they just a distraction? And should his team be hitting back much harder at this point?
No, I wouldn't be hitting back much harder. This is not what they want to be talking about. They need to be attacking Jon Ossoff and putting forward a positive vision for America and how he will serve differently than Jon Ossoff, how he will represent conservative values in the Senate as opposed to Jon Ossoff's liberal values. That's what his campaign needs to be talking about. And look, it is absurd for Senator Ossoff to suggest that official resources were used. Look, just stick to the politics, Senator Ossoff. You can attack. It's fair game to attack. That's fine. But let's not have ridiculous claims. Of course, there's not any official funds involved with what his son-in-law is saying on Twitter and TikTok and YouTube or wherever else. That's his own business. Look, it's not fair always to blame a candidate for what somebody in their family is doing. It is always a really tricky balance to maintain. I think this is a fair topic to debate. It's fair to ask Mike Collins his views on it, given how close he is to his son-in-law. They live on the same plot of land there. And I think Mike Collins does need to respond a little more thoroughly than what we had in that statement, because it only covered anti-Semitism, and he's right. His voting record is very strongly pro-Israel. Much of the white nationalist movement is anti-Israel and sees it as a criminal regime. So he does have some distance there in his own record. But of course, white nationalism covers far more than just Jewish people as far as the views. And so I think speaking out about representing all Georgians, no matter your race, no matter your religion, and you're going to be their advocate no matter what, I think that's what people need to hear from Mike Collins, and then we can all move on.
Now, Melina, your take.
Well, it's interesting. Greg Bluestein posted the screenshots of the fact that the Collins campaign took down the family photographs from the campaign website, which included this son-in-law. So they're obviously feeling some heat from the fact that Mike Collins demonstrates his lack of character and integrity by the company he keeps, not just the family company, but also the staffers who've had to leave the campaign. And so I just think that it's very interesting. This white Christian nationalist movement, they like to thump the Bible, but they don't technically seem to have read it or followed its principles in many ways.
Well, let me just respond. Mike Collins has a stellar record of condemning anti-Semitism, of condemning racism of any form. He was actually not at the Trump event because he was there in Washington voting for Israeli aid that was in the National Defense Authorization Bill that the Democrats opposed. And I think that I agree with Brian. You can't help what some family members say. He's repeatedly said he totally disagrees with his son-in-law. I don't know how much more he has to say that, and a lot of times liberal media omits that he repeatedly has said this. And I like to hear Jon Ossoff condemn the Democrat Socialists of America and their increasingly anti-Jewish, anti-Israel strain. He doesn't say a word about that. How about that, Ossoff? Are you going to talk about the increasingly anti-Semitic strains that we see even in the Georgia Democrat Party? Doesn't say a word about that.
I think that Phil Kent and Brian Robinson has done more to defend Mike Collins in his campaign than the Collins campaign has. Yes, he said that I disagree with my son-in-law statement, but what Phil and Brian just said is what the Collins campaign should be saying. But Deidre, I'm gonna ask another question. Where is Mike Collins? Seriously, we have not seen Mike Collins
working in Congress.
Okay, but he's become the nominee. He's working in Congress, and you know this, Phil. You cover them. The men and women in Congress and Senate, they do have weekends, and they usually come home on Thursday, and they have what they call constituency, breaks, and they come home during recess and they campaign to voters. We haven't seen them, and more importantly, Deidre, we have not seen him and Rick Jackson together. Now you've seen Jon Ossoff and Keisha Lance Bottoms. They're touring the state, showing this unity, right? So I gotta believe that based on some articles that have come out, I wonder is Mike Collins really dragging down the Rick Jackson ticket right now? Is he somebody that maybe Republicans don't feel that they want to be associated this closely with because of his inability to come out and explain some of these very factual and I believe fair attacks on his campaign? So let's wait and see where he is. But it's go time. It's go season. You're the nominee, and you see unity on the Democratic side. And this up until the Trump rally, that was the most that we've seen Republicans come together in a unified sort of ticket on constitutional officers that are running for re-election. Or election. So let's see what happens. But where's Mike Collins, Phil?
Well, he's working up in Congress, and that's where Ossoff has been. And Mike comes to the events on the weekends. That's fine. Yeah. But to say he's doing nothing, and Collins would have been at the event, except he had to vote for our defense package, which all the Democrats opposed, by the way.
Melita?
The conservative Washington Examiner kind of praised the fact that Collins stayed in Washington to give Trump cover from having to be seen with him.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. Well, coming up, a new poll drops in key Georgia races, and massive data centers are setting up shop in Columbia and Effingham counties. We'll have that next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Older voters could end up deciding who wins some of Georgia's biggest political battles this fall. According to a new AARP poll released this week, voters 50 and older are poised to play a crucial role in tight statewide races for governor and the U.S. Senate. In Georgia's U.S. Senate race, incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff holds a 9-point lead over his opponent, Congressman Mike Collins. But among voters 50 plus, 53% support Collins, compared with 45% who favor Ossoff. Now, the poll showed similar findings in Georgia's gubernatorial race. 48% of all likely voters polled support Democratic candidate Keisha Lance Bottoms, while 42% prefer Republican gubernatorial candidate Rick Jackson. Looking at voters 50 plus, however, the race changes. 55% prefer Jackson, compared with 42% who would vote for Bottoms. So, Theron, while Democrats performed well overall in the poll, older voters are a strong voting bloc, and this poll indicates Republican candidates' platforms really appear to be resonating better with those with that demographic.
Well, I think the one thing that my colleagues all have said, and we'll say this when we look at polling, Deidre, is that you don't really pay that close attention to the horse race. That's the head-to-head number right now in this sort of situation of the campaign, because it could change. The candidates really haven't really gone too positive yet. While Keisha Lance Bottoms has put out a positive ad, Jon Ossoff has put out 2 ads. We have yet to see Rick Jackson put out a paid ad yet on his campaign, and Mike Collins, who is struggling raising money right now, now can't really sort of muster up the money to actually go on the attack against Jon Ossoff or defend his record. So I think that this poll showed, Deidre, that older voters, as I like to call them, more seasoned voters, including my mother, they're paying very close attention to this race, and they are the most dependable age group that we have, particularly when you go 50 and older. And even we saw recently in the primary that the 65 and older seasoned voters, the women and men, actually turned out in great numbers and turned out early. I believe that the issue around health care, public safety, having a pathway to additional education, whether it's secondary education, technical schools, pre-K, these are all going to be the things that I think candidates are going to be watching. But I tell you this as someone right now that is proud to still have my mother living, the amount of money that she's paying for health care right now to just be able to continue the day-to-day, I got to believe that many of us probably have similar situations with our parents and our grandparents. And so health care is going to be very prominent there. But I think with younger voters, economic prosperity, access to good paying jobs is going to be another big issue.
Melita?
Well, I thought the interesting thing in that poll was that 88% of the older category of voters are highly motivated voters, whereas only 62% of those younger voters are highly motivated voters. So turnout will be a key, and getting the message to the proper group of voters for each candidate is going to be important.
That's right. And Brian, affordability really for the seasoned voters, as they're called them. I'm sure my mother would appreciate that as well. The seasoned voters, affordability, Social Security, health care really are key issues for them.
Well, sure. And, the Republicans have not had a lot of daylight between them and Democrats when it comes to making sure they're going to protect Social Security for current recipients and for future ones. We hear Republicans on the state level talking about one of the major issues for seniors in our state, which is property taxes. Many having to sell their homes that they raise their kids in because they can't afford the rising cost of property taxes, which went up 49% throughout the state on average over the last 5 years. So Republicans are addressing those issues with seniors, and certainly the cost of care. If you have a parent with dementia, it is a financial catastrophe for that family. We have a close family friend that dealt with that, and we do have to find some societal solution to what we do in those trying circumstances. But what's important here is what Melita got into, is you're seeing all these polls that many of which have been over-indexed with Democrat respondents, showing Keisha Lance Bottoms and Jon Ossoff with leads, Keisha's leads being smaller than Ossoff's. But when you break it down into people most likely to actually show up, and the over 65s are diehard voters. They do show up. They are far overrepresented in the electorate compared to their numbers in the population. That's where the Republican advantage is. The most likely voters are with them, and that's going to be a huge difference here. And I want Democrats to get super excited about these polls that show Keisha Lance Bottoms with a small lead. I want them to be really confident.
Phil?
Well, I agree with Brian. You got to be very cautious about some of these polls that are just done by either conservative or liberal organizations. AARP is a liberal group. We all know that, and they endorse Democrat candidates. But it is true. We all agree that the senior citizen vote is going to be super important. Yes, turnout is big. We all agree on that. These are highly motivated bases. I think that the Republican conservative base has been proven to be really motivated in Georgia. The key is for both parties to get the young vote. Now, I'm impressed with young voters turning more Republican in the last couple cycles. And so the bottom line, though, is Theron named all of the appropriate policy issues. The Republicans have all the answers, and looking into the future, I mean, and Rick Jackson is a healthcare executive. He knows how to get the prices down. Trump, at the event the other day, pointed out how he's gotten pharmaceuticals down almost single-handedly with his administration. He's working on healthcare. You don't read a lot about it in the Atlanta media, with exceptions, is so biased.
All right, we'll leave it there. Coming up next, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Well, we we ran out of time to discuss data centers and the big news there, so you're going to handle that for us, Brian.
Yeah, well, I'll make some major data center announcements this week. My winner, of course, Columbia County over in the Augusta area said that Google will be the end user of its new data center, which will go a long way toward eliminating homesteaded property taxes in that county. It's a remarkable economic development story. And then Effingham County announced a $20 billion project. It'll eventually be 1,000 jobs, 6-figure salaries. This will be revolutionary for Southeast Georgia, just like the Hyundai plant was, so good on them. My loser is Democrat voters who are complaining about the President of the United States being invited and hosted by a public school. Shame on you. This is a recurring pattern of Democrats attacking anyone who platforms, quote unquote, to use the left's language, anyone who disagrees with them. Like, they want everyone silenced if you don't speak from the songbook. And this is just another example. We saw it with Toast. We saw it when I was on V103. And it's backfiring. Middle America, middle Georgia, they see what you're doing.
Theron?
Oh, God, Brian, you're not being canceled, brother. You're going to be okay. And also, we don't know that it was all Democrats who were complaining about Donald Trump's abuse of a rally to basically make it political. I want to first give a shout out to Charlotta Wilson-Jack. She becomes the new general president for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated there in Las Vegas. So congratulations, Charlotta. And also congratulations to the Atlanta History Center for their new Civil Rights Museum, More Perfect Union. They're doing a great job over there. I encourage people to go check it out.
Bill?
You know, I've got a winner over in McDuffie County. He's the longtime sheriff, Logan Marshall, and he is the Georgia Sheriff's Association Lawman of the Year, Sheriff of the Year. And also Lanier Resort, one of my favorite places. They just opened a new par 3 course for all you golfers. They just had a reception the other day, so they're winners.
All right, Melita.
My winner is former Fulton County Commission Chair Michael Lomax, who is stepping down as the CEO and president of the United Negro College Fund after raising $4 billion to fund the education of 300,000 students during his 22-year tenure. And I also want to make Senator Jon Ossoff a winner for his questioning of DOD Secretary Pete Hegseth. He really held him accountable and his feet to the fire.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us, and have a great week.